Hello and welcome to The Promise and a show about Manchester United and part of the 90 Min Podcast Network. I'm Scott Saunders, joined by Rob Blanchette. As usual, talking about another Manchester United defeat, fourth of the Premier League season at home to Crystal Palace. Was this the worst of the lot so far, Rob?
No, it wasn't. And funnily enough, even though we lost the game, it wasn't even the worst performance. Like I think when we've won games this season, there's been some worse displays across the pitch. But yes, we're forced to talk about that today. A disappointing result. Scott, I'm going to keep saying it. I think there are bits that are improving for Manchester United, even though it doesn't feel like that at the moment for fans.
Yeah, we'll talk about Palace. United back in the Champions League from Tuesday night. We'll be doing a live show-ish. I'm not sure whether it's live or there will be a show after the football when United play on Tuesday night. Hopefully, we'll be talking about a win, but you're not so sure at the moment. Galatasaray visit Old Trafford, so that should be, well, it's the return of Champions League football to Old Trafford. How long will it stay at Old Trafford? We wait and see, but they do get at least 3 games in that competition before the end of the year. But yeah, we'll talk about that. We'll talk about the fallout to the Palace game. We'll talk about players like Marcus Rashford, Sofiane Amrabat, Lisandro Martinez's injury, Antony's return to training, and just everything in between. But we will be back on Tuesday, like I say, for another show after the Galatasaray game. But subscribe wherever you get your pods and follow us on YouTube. Subscribe to the channel, The Promise and the Manchester United Podcast. Like the video, subscribe, etc. Leave a comment and pop the notification bell on as well. Follow us on social media as well at @_Scott Saunders on X, IG, and TikTok, at @_Rob_B on X and YouTube, and at Promise and MU on X as well. So, Rob, you were there for the Palace game. I'm hearing different things. I mean, I watched it, but people who don't follow Man United seem to be suggesting to me that the fans were not happy with Erik ten Hag because they booed at the end. I mean, yeah, you're making a face for those people who are actually listening. I mean, I'm not going to entertain this, unfortunately. And, fair enough. Like, maybe there's some criticism. You're going to get criticism if you can't beat Crystal Palace at home. But they've been doing it for a few years now, so it's not like it hasn't happened before. We never get too high, never too low, as you like to say. Where do we sit after that?
Well, there was all of booing, Scott, for about 2.5 seconds at the end of the game. So if people in the press, Twitter, wherever want to read something into that fans are not happy, well, yeah, for 2.5 seconds, there was a few people that booed. That was that, really. I think when we all walked out the stadium, we all kind of felt a feeling of deja vu and apathy towards the result because it's stuff that we've seen before. It doesn't feel something that's kind of Erik ten Hag centric. It's Manchester United centric, isn't it? It's 10 years of stuff like that happening at Old Trafford. So, of course, everyone's disappointed with the result. But as I said at the top of the show, there's been times this year we've actually won games and I've come away from matches and been more concerned and thought, well, you won the game, but you didn't do this, and this. But you won the games, that's okay. You get away with it. And yet in that Crystal Palace game, near on 77% possession, Manchester United dominated the game in so many parts, in phases of play, but couldn't create to score a goal. And that is something that we've seen many times before. And I think we'll see more times this season because if your creatives are not doing their job, Scott, you're in trouble. It's just as simple as that. Crystal Palace got their goal, which felt like a little bit of a sucker punch, like a bit of a fluke, smashes it, goes in the back of the net. But after that, I think with United, and it's more the second half for me, is that they still do look like a team that are not quite sure about what they are. Like, we're in these situations, how do we just break down a low block? How do we pass the ball? How do we work that out? Saying that, I do think that the transition from back to front was better than we've seen. There was much more control, and they got to the edge of the final third. It's just that, Scott, when they get there, they don't know what to do.
But was that not Crystal Palace's game plan? Like,
of course.
So you can say that the transition from the back was better, but Palace were willing to allow that to happen because they were packed in front of their own box.
Of course. And if you get the first goal, I think this is a very different game than what we're doing here is a very different show. And we're talking about maybe Man United getting the first goal, turning the screw on Palace, and Palace being forced to come out and allowing more space. But they did a Roy Hodgson. As soon as they got the goal, Scott, we knew what was going to happen. It was like I had a script there at Old Trafford. I was reading it going, well, Palace will sit in the low block and Man United will get more and more frustrated and it will look worse and worse and worse. So, yeah, you lose the football match. You didn't kind of lose it just because of the goal. You lost it because of the tide. It just went against you. But there were still bits of the game that I thought actually went really well for Man United. And this is why I always talk about possession in the way I do when we talk about our football club, is that Man United do not need to become a better possession team. You don't need 77% of the ball. You need to be better in transition and with possession. So that's something I think that's going to take time for United to mature into.
I don't know if I agree with that. I think obviously, well, Crystal Palace, when they come to Old Trafford next season, they're going to do the same thing again.
Of course, yeah.
So really, you do need to play faster. You do need to work on attacking patterns, which will open up a low block and this kind of thing. So I don't know if I agree with that, the fact that they don't need to be better in possession, because I think they did not use the ball well enough. They didn't create enough chances. But obviously they did make some, probably not enough for Man United laying siege to a team who were beating them at Old Trafford. But, I think there's still plenty to work on. And United need to find, what's the phrase? Different ways to skin a cat. I'm not sure. Can we say that nowadays?
Of course
I'm
you can.
not sure. But like that phrase, they need to find different ways of winning matches. And they can't always rely on spacing behind to exploit.
But that's why I'm talking about possession in that way, because, possession's only 9/10 of the law. Let's do all the catchphrases. Yeah, United had all the possession of that game. The problem was the final ball. The problem was when they were within 10 yards of the box, Scott, they haven't got a clue who they are. This is the difference between a Man City that has all the possession, but completely knows what to do through the phases. And when they get in the box, in the box, it isn't about possession. In the box, it's about creativity and about taking chances at the right time, Scott, but also creating just normal chances. Like one of the things that I felt at the end of the Palace game was that United got the ball in wide areas so often and just didn't swing it in. Like just sometimes get your head up and swing it in on the penalty spot and help the striker. And United don't do that. What do they do instead, Scott? A midfielder, primarily a Bruno Fernandes type player, gets the ball and chips it into the box, and it's easy to defend. So United, it's like they're going through the actions like, oh, look, we've done really well up to this part of the pitch, but we're not going to like gamble here because like we don't know what to do with that. We're not going to help the striker. So that's a kind of, I think, an identity crisis, I think, where Ten Hag has to solve that. I think the only way he solves that, Scott, is by rotating some of his options, getting different players in different positions to be able to do that. And then we'll see improvements, I think, from there.
Yeah, I mean, that's a question to talk about here, I suppose. Bruno, as you mentioned, and Marcus Rashford were brought back into the team.
Yeah.
We'll start with Rashford, actually, just because, I'm seeing that he's getting a lot of criticism. His performances this season have not been good. Like, there's no getting away from that. Ten Hag said in his pre-match press conference on Friday that players build up a level of credit, and if they're not delivering on the pitch, eventually they will run out of credit and lose their place in the team.
It's a great quote.
Yeah. And it kind of works that way. Like, I suppose my question to you is, have we seen the end of Marcus Rashford's credit? Because he hasn't, let's see, he scored 2 goals in 5 months or something like that.
Yeah.
Because I don't know for sure, but obviously he had that purple patch around February and had a 30-goal season last year in all comps, but it's just not, he looks different. He
does look a bit different, and I think it's not as black and white as maybe just looking at kind of the core metrics of goals and stats. I think what it's about now is that Manchester United, from the end of last season to this season, the idea was to grow, was to improve, was that when you got around the box, Scott, you could do different stuff. Now, we know that didn't really happen in pre-season, and we know that Man United here, what was the difference between midweek and the weekend? Well, it was your 2 stars, wasn't it? And I consider Bruno and Marcus as our 2 stars, really, in terms of, the wage bill and the expectations on these players. Now, in midweek, what worked really well, Scott, was that they popped the ball through the midfield into the attack, and it worked really well. It was really fluid. And that disappeared because Palace got their goal and then clogged up all the channels. But then it's up to your stars to do the job, isn't it? It's up to Marcus to do the job. It's up to Bruno to do the job. I think with Rashford, the key difference here is that now he's got a number 9 on the inside, is that he has to defer a lot of some of that attacking play to that 9. He has to look up and start linking with the 9. Now, everyone saw it in the first 20 minutes, I think it was, where Marcus runs into a brick wall of 3 players. And that's classic Marcus. And when he did that, there was a bit of a groan in the stadium. And then after that, Scott, for half an hour, he was trying to play balls into Højlund that weren't there. And you're like, no, just do it the right time, Marcus. So what you said there about Ten Hag, about credit, I totally agree with that. And I think that's where we are, because guess who you've got there? You've got a young lad called Garnacho. So I think that's the way it will go. I think Marcus will sit on the bench at some points now as we go forward. He's run out of credit. He's rightfully run out of credit. And I think we'll see Garnacho being more of a facilitator on the left and a creator, because that's really what United need at the moment, is they need some creativity in that final third, in that front 3 positions.
I would even do it tomorrow, really. I would make the change to the Champions League. It's just, there's this thing about United that they've had for a number of years where, and Ten Hag has denied this, but where they have players who are so high profile that they just always play. Yeah. And that is, and I don't think Ten Hag is like this, but I think the time has come where he might have picked him a little too often, given the output that he's showing. Ten Hag needs to, what's the word, a meritocracy. He needs to install that kind of, and he's talked about doing it, but in reality, he hasn't really done it, because maybe he hasn't had the options available. United have had injuries, this kind of thing, but they do have, when everyone's fit, like a large squad now. So obviously you got Garnacho in that other position on the left-hand side, understudy to Rashford. Now might be the time. I mean, and there's no better way to kind of make a statement than for a player who's not performing, hey, buck your ideas up a little bit, you need to change, than dropping in for a Champions League game.
Yeah, on my old show, when we used to look at Ole Gunnar Solskjaer's tactics, we used to talk about meritocracy all the time and about favoritism and whatnot. And my kind of spin on that at the time is that player hierarchy exists at every club. So there's a manager who will look at his players and he'll say, well, he does this, he does that, and this is how I want to set up. And there'll be times when players play that we think, well, surely you could give someone else a go. I think the issue is with Erik Ten Hag is that we are still thin on those players, in terms of like who are your automatic starters. And the truth is, you probably shouldn't have automatic starters. You should probably rotate more. At Man City, Scott, you don't know who's really starting week to week. Maybe Haaland, and then it's like everyone else, isn't it? Maybe the goalkeeper most weeks. I think you look at Man United and you look at Marcus Rashford, if you're just doing it on form and that's where you're going, then it's time for Marcus to go to the bench. That's the way I look at it, is that you look at the performance in midweek, and I think United look more balanced, Scott, with kind of more wider, dynamic, creative young players in the wide areas at the moment. And I think that will help Højlund more. And that will also help the midfield, because the midfield will be able to push the ball through into the channels. And Marcus doesn't do those things. So what do you do, Scott? You go put him on the bench. And I think that he will actually appreciate coming on for half an hour and being an impact player to run in behind when players are tired and he's fresh, because that's his game, isn't it? So this is not like dig Marcus Rashford out and not have him in the team ever again. This is, let's help him find form in a different way. I still have faith in Marcus, but I think his skill set doesn't really fit what United are trying to do in their own evolution. It might mean, Scott, in the next windows, you start looking at creative players in those positions a little bit more, as opposed to just players you can run in behind.
Not the only one who copped a bit of flack. Sofian Amrabat did. And
yeah, weird.
Yeah, it's just the way that it is nowadays, Rob, isn't it? Like this is a guy who's like joined a new team in a new league and been played out of position in every appearance that he's been named in because of injury problems at left back, specifically 3 players out injured. I think Reguilon. How far away is Reguilon? He shouldn't be too far away, should he? But
minor injury, but I think Reguilon might be a couple of weeks. We'll see.
Yeah, I did see that actually after the national break. So Amrabat's in there. We know what he can do from. We've seen an example of it from the midweek game against Palace.
Yeah,
drifting into the field, dictating the play, this kind of thing. But he is not a left back, and apparently that doesn't stop criticism from media and social media alike.
No, it doesn't stop any people on Twitter going mad about effectively nothing. There was that couple of times, a couple of comedy handballs in there, and I understand people have taken that and really run with that, and I find that confusing because I think while we're seeing in football that fullbacks invert on their right foot and come inside, especially on the left, that's a thing that happens a lot. It's been kind of called out as the reason why he's bad or Man United are bad, and let's be honest, it's not true, is it? It's effectively faux. That's just kind of false. So I thought he actually played quite well on the day. What I like about him, Scott, is that he has a sensibility in that midfield department. So he's not really number 6, but he knows how to get the ball from midfield, from defence into midfield, and then allow the midfielders to go and do their job. Now, I thought against Crystal Palace and the game in midweek, he did that absolutely in spades. That's how I described it. And I'm happy about that. As you said, he's not a left back. And that means that he might get done behind once or twice. But what are your choices? You haven't really got any choices there. He can do the role. It's temporary. You live with it. What I do like also about Amrabat, Scott, is that I think it gives Ten Hag some more forward-thinking options as we go into the season. What we're seeing at the moment is Casemiro kind of tucking into a role, which, again, I don't think he's very good at, pushing towards number 8. Bruno Fernandes still kind of playing a number 8 role, which I think always, it just looks a bit, well, the word I used at Old Trafford was squashed. Like he looks like he doesn't quite know to whether to stick or twist most of the time. I want to see him play the number 10. And I think it means that if you get Amrabat in future months and maybe say a Mason Mount, who's very mobile, you get Hannibal back in there, you get Manu back, maybe even promote Dan Gore to play games, you're then getting a more fluid midfield. You're getting midfielders that can do stuff that we've moaned about for, say, the last 12 or 24 months and even beyond. So I thought his performance was fine. He's literally like the least problem in the team at the moment.
Well, the big problem is that United are not winning matches enough.
Yeah.
And I suppose, Rob, a round off to this question or this topic. How much more of that? You know, because like where I stand is I kind of reached at the weekend. I've seen that performance several times before. Kind of went a little bit back towards apathy. They've lost 4 out of 7 Premier League games. Yeah. It looks like this season might be a bit of a challenge. There's no real... I know you said you thought the performance was positive in elements, but they haven't really played well all season, barring the game against Palace's C team or B team in the League Cup. So the noise is inevitably, when these results are coming, the noise is inevitably going to mount up and pressure is going to build on the manager. Like, how much of this are you willing to tolerate, I guess? Because what I'm trying to say is I don't think that United can finish 12th this season. As far as I'm concerned, I'll stick by the manager. Like, I think I'm deciding on that. Where do you sit?
Yeah, 12th is a leap of faith, Scott. Like, if we're in that position as the season goes on, then we will have to have a different kind of tone of conversation. You know, you have to be judged on whether you win or lose games. That's life. That's
what I'm trying to say is, do you not think that this is a necessary pain that United need to go through in order to correct a pattern that has established itself over the last 10 years? It's like, oh, hire a manager, you do well for 1 season or 2 seasons, you're not supported properly, your players start to turn, the fans start to turn, you sack a manager, new manager comes in, you have a bit of a bounce. Oh, wait, it's not actually going to work. Oh, wait, let's sack the manager, let's try somebody else. Do you feel like this is the start of that, I suppose?
No, I don't. No, I think this feels different to me as it stands. Like I always kind of can pull rank on it in terms of opinion and say to myself, it might change. Like if things continue to degrade, then you end up having a different opinion as time goes on. But that's not what I'm seeing. It's also not what we're hearing, Scott. Like we're not hearing of player mutiny at Man United. We're really not. We're not hearing that Manchester United themselves want to kind of change their project as it stands. But you can't continue to lose games. For me, Scott, when we talk about performances, I quite often take the winning or the losing out of it. So I was massively critical of Man United with the Wolves match, and people went, but you won, so why are you upset? And I'm like, I'm not upset. I'm highlighting the things that are not working. And yet you lose the game to Crystal Palace, and it's arguably that we played so much better against Crystal Palace than we did against Wolves. But guess what? You won one game and you lost the other. And it's kind of like as simple as that, I think, with football. I think with Eric Ten Hag, his job here, Scott, is to get it back to base level, is to get it back to ground level. It doesn't matter if you're not playing well, win games. At least get yourself back to that. And had Man United been a little bit more creative, Scott, and then that sucker punch doesn't go in the back of the net from, a worldie that just smashes into the roof. Even if you'd drawn that game 0-0, Scott, this would be a different kind of conversation, wouldn't it? So goals matter, creating matters. Man United need to get better at those things. But as you just said there, Scott, this is a manager that hasn't been completely backed. He's spent money. He's bought players. I still think primarily his signings have been good. I hear a lot about identity again. Like I said there in the final third, what is your identity? It feels like that is being built towards the edge of the box. But this is why we're talking about dropping Marcus Rashford. Because if your identity is just running in behind, guess what? You're not going to be able to do it every week. You're going to get caught. People are going to read it. So, no, I don't feel that at the moment. A really poor start to the season in terms of results, 4 defeats out of 7 is unacceptable. But I still think that you could go fix these things. I really do. I think you've got enough. You've got to bring players back from injury. And your system itself, in my eyes, as I'm talking about, is growing. There are better things happening on the football pitch than we saw in pre-season, right at the start of the season. But results are not reflecting that yet, Scott. And you have to get there, don't you? When we saw them against Brentford a year ago, it was like that, wasn't it? 4-0, you lost. And it felt like the end almost, like to people. It was like, this is not going to get better. Guess what? It got better, didn't it? So I feel confident that we're treading, unfortunately, this similar path as we did last season. I don't think United are going to be contenders for anything, but I think you'll have to suck that up because there are teams that are better than you at the moment.
The pressure will grow, though, is all I'm saying. And I can already see people suggesting, oh, the manager doesn't have a clue. Like this is a guy who's taken Ajax to, late phases in the Champions League and talked about a philosophy for the duration of his career.
Yeah.
So it's not like he doesn't have a clue,
But I refuse, Scott, when people say that in our industry, either that be, I'm going to get uppity here, pundits, yeah? If you say stuff like that, I know you're not watching the games. So when you get a lot of people going, oh, he hasn't got a clue about what?
Some United fans.
Obviously fans as well. But fan opinion is fan opinion, and they can say whatever they want at the end of the day. Like, fans pay their money; they can really say whatever they want. But when we talk about the industry side of it, which generates a lot of the hits and clicks and pushes content towards things and what people watch and decide. One of the things that we just saw only yesterday was talking about Amrabat again playing left back and how foolish it is to play a player who's a right-footed player at left back. That's shocking, isn't it? And that was the punditry. Yet we're seeing a lot of right-footed players play at left back, aren't we, across the league, across the world? So that's what I'm talking about, because that gets pushed into popular opinion and like it's a reason why United are bad. And if you're watching the game and you're at the game, you're in the stadium, that's not why United are bad. So this is the whole thing, is that I think that's why we try and bring a little bit of balance in our show, because we could shout and scream like we do, don't we? Away from the cameras, we get annoyed about Man United and what happens sometimes. But overall, I think after the cold light of day, you can kind of calm down and go, well, that bit was good, but this bit still kind of stinks and you have to work on it. I don't think it's a manager thing. I didn't look at the tactics against Crystal Palace, Scott, and think, oh, if you'd done something massively different tactically, you'd have won this game 4-0. Like, I didn't think
it really does make a difference who scores the first goal. United have, I know they scored the first goal at Arsenal, but they conceded within 30 seconds of scoring that. They scored the first goal in games that they've won. Yeah. But then how many of the other games have they scored the first goal in?
Yeah.
You got Bayern, no. Burnley, they won. Brighton, no. Forest, no. They did come back to win that, actually.
Yeah.
Tottenham, no. When United, that's one thing that United haven't shown consistently enough, is the ability to react to falling behind.
Totally. And this is why when we talk about tactics and the manager and all those things intertwined, is that I think a lot of this comes down to some very basic stuff like sloppiness. So like when you're in the final third, make it count, do the right thing in that moment, in that action. You've done 8 passes to get there and you've done it all perfectly. You haven't lost the ball. You created a really good position. Then don't just chip the ball in the box. feed the ball in, do something incisive, use your skill and your talent. And I think at United, there's a lot of deferring that. I think we see that so often. And I don't know if that's the manager's fault. I really don't. I think the manager's not saying, hey, guys, don't be creative in the final third. I think what he's saying is be better. And they seem to lose it mentally in those moments. And you saw with the last 20 minutes of the game, I really didn't feel United were going to score. It just got stale. They got to the edge of the box and Palace looked comfortable. So I put that on our big players, Scott. Like, our bigger players have to be better. And if you're earning the big money at Man United, you better deliver the big metrics. Like, that's the way I look at it. That's why I'm all has faith in kids, because I think if you bring kids in, they play without fear quite often, and they do make better choices in those moments because they're just playing more naturally. So, as I said, I think we missed Hannibal. I think we missed other players, some of the young players in the core. And I think you can rotate that as you go forward and give players opportunity. Maybe some of the bigger names are going to have to sit on the bench every now and then.
Well, one player who is going to sit in the stands or at home for 3 months is Lisandro Martinez.
Yeah.
He is undergoing surgery, I believe, today to correct an injury that he's already rehabilitated from, but not properly, by the seams of it. Question here is why? How's this happened?
Okay, I spoke to someone at the end of Lisandro Martinez's last game, and we talked about it, and it was being mooted then that he might need some surgery. This is when United were saying he was still available. It's a funny thing with metatarsal injuries in terms of bone healing and the ligaments around there and one through another, is that sometimes the injury looks like it's healed. You can come back, you can do all the work. But you sometimes see in a player's performances, Scott, and I remember this clearly with Wayne Rooney going back and David Beckham's a long time ago, is that players come back, they look fit, they look ready, they go do the training. But when you actually really watch them, like pinpoint, you can see it's not right. And I felt that with Martinez really since pre-season and going into this season. So like you've just put the question there, which is what Twitter's been asking, isn't it? Is that how do you get here? Well, you get here because you want your best players back. And if they go through the kind of jump through the hoops and are getting towards full fitness, you'll kind of take someone who's not 10% at his very, very best, not quite there. And unfortunately, what's happened with Martinez, and it's been quite clear, is that the injury hasn't healed properly. So he's going to need some clean-up surgery. Clean-up surgery means that he's going to need some rest and rehabilitation, and that's probably going to take you 6 to 8 weeks minimum. That might even take you 12 weeks. That's just where you are, Scott. And this is why I worry about the likes of Varane and players like that, because if you get players who get injuries or pick up problems, that it's never just a 5 or 10 day thing, is it? It can sometimes be a month at a time. And that's where you are. You should have gone and bought Kim Min-jae. It's just as simple as that. If you bought Kim Min-jae, this conversation is not as important. You're going to see a lot more Victor Lindelof. Like I've not dug Victor Lindelof out at all, Scott. But again, I don't really like his performances this year. Not lately, but I think that the same issues that you see with Victor still remain.
I believe you said at one point you didn't want to see Victor Lindelof play.
I didn't ever want to see him play for us again. I'd have sold him in the summer. That's my choice. I would have sold him and Maguire. I'd have got rid of both. I don't want the Chuckle brothers running our defence at the end of the day. That's just my preference. And I think with Victor Lindelof, he's not played particularly badly. But you even saw with Palace and with Eze, is that Eze was like, I'm not going anywhere near Amrabat. I'm just going to target that space between Lindelof and Dalot because everyone targets that space. That's what everyone does against Man United. So that's a problem. You saw that Varane was obviously having to cover left and right quite a lot. And it is what it is. But I think kind of when you, on balance of those things, we look at players like Lindelof, you're going to have to find solutions with something that you haven't probably got at the moment. Like we'll probably see some more Johnny Evans. And people will be like, oh, you've got this 35-year-old, it costs you nothing. Yeah, you might see some more Maguire. And I said on the weekend, I'm not convinced that Lindelof is better than Maguire. Like, I thought Maguire played really well midweek. And if I'm the manager and we're talking about meritocracy, maybe you should be playing Harry Maguire there. I don't know. What do you think, Scott? Oh, you don't want to commit.
What an awful question you just asked me.
It's a real question now, isn't it? This is the questions that the manager has to ask himself all the time.
I mean, I don't particularly think one of them is much better than the other one.
No.
I think there are times where Lindelof has been in decent form. We're probably in the pecking order. Yes, Lindelof is ahead of him.
He is.
But I'm sure we'll see a combination of both of them. I'm sure we'll see a combination of Varane and Maguire. I'm sure we'll see a combination of Lindelof and Varane coming up, and sure we'll see Johnny Evans in there at times as well. So it's a case of neither of them are first choice pairings.
No.
So
Lindelof and Martinez, I prefer. Lindelof and Martinez, I prefer. I think that works. I think when you have Varane, who's a lot more mobile and technical, I think you can get away with Maguire more. I think Maguire gets the ball down on the deck and can play more progressive football than Lindelof in that position. I still think that probably Johnny Evans is a better footballer than both on the deck, but are you starting a 35-year-old there? Probably not. So, it's a tough question, but I do think that the manager's one he has to answer, isn't it? If you want to have a meritocracy, then you have to really be true about that and allow players that if they're in better form, that you play them. That was not me calling for Harry Maguire to start. People, like don't get upset. I'm just saying that I think that they're not actually, that one isn't better than the other when you've got people missing.
We've been here before, though, haven't we? We're talking about
every year,
changing the way that United play, and we're talking about Harry Maguire and Victor Lindelof, the Ole Gunnar Solskjaer centre-back pairing, potentially being what we stick with moving forward. Anyway.
And I don't think that's Erik ten Hag's fault. I think Erik ten Hag would have got rid of these players if he'd have the opportunity. And this is why we must keep reiterating that this is the board. And that the board doesn't get rid of players that the manager doesn't want, then you're stuck with them and you have to use them. And I would rather use Maguire, Scott, and build him up and him becoming useful to an extent than him just being this figure of fun and him just being someone on the bench or whatever. Use him, because even if he plays well then, Scott, you might be able to sell him for the price that you want. That's how it works. So you've got injuries. You're going to have to move some pieces around.
Probably see why now Harry Maguire stuck around, because he did think he would get playing time. And, United are never too far away from an injury crisis. And Lisandro Martinez out for 3 months. Probably that would make it the rest of this year, unless there's a miracle recovery. But yeah.
Well, they might rush him back.
I don't think they'll make that same mistake twice, to be honest.
Well, they're doing it with Luke Shaw. It's the same issue. Luke Shaw's got an issue and they're worried about it. And Luke Shaw could be playing football now. He could be. He's fit. He's training. He's back at Carrington. He's doing all the on-pitch, on-grass stuff. But they're going, he's really important to the system. We need him in the weeks and months ahead. So let's get him right, because we need him. And that's the way they're looking at it. I think with Martinez, they didn't want to play Maguire there. They didn't want to play Lindelof there. They know that they brought in Johnny Evans at 35. So they pushed him harder because, again, he's really important to the system. But they decided to rush him. And you rush players, guess what? Sometimes they get injured again, and they're back under the knife. So that's where you are with it.
Right, let's move to United. One of their have they made a statement since? No. Statement FC. People
another
have
statement. More statement than points.
Is it actually?
It feels like that.
They have 9 Premier League points.
Yeah, I hate it when I get buzzers on my phone and it just says Man United club statement, and I'm going, oh no, here we go again.
Rob, I don't know how deeply you want to go into this, but Antony is back in training and was brought in. United made an announcement on Friday that he would return to training. I believe things are ongoing with the matters off pitch regarding Antony, but the club have felt comfortable enough to bring him back into training. He was seen at Old Trafford with his kid on Saturday, and I believe he rejoined training from Saturday as well. So he's back in the mix. Erik ten Hag has said he doesn't know. Well, I'm sure he probably does now, or probably has a better idea of how fit he is. But he's back in and available for selection. What do you make of it?
Yeah, he's been training away from Manchester United anyway, so I don't think he'll be too far off. He'll obviously get his match practice back. I think the situation is at the moment is that Manchester United, in their own infinite wisdom, totally believe that there'll be no charges brought now. I think that's, in terms of United's connections in England, Manchester and Great Manchester Police, that's the belief at the moment. And United have done the typical club statement, isn't it? Is that we believe that domestic abuse is wrong, etc., etc., etc. But what did they say? Antony is our employee. I think they said, and Antony's our employee, and we're his employer. So our decision is that as it stands, he comes back to training. That's kind of where it stands. So I don't think we'll see any charges because that's the lay of the land. And in a football sense, Scott, bringing back Antony, we're talking about creativity. Does Antony give you more creativity on the right-hand side? No, I probably don't think that he's actually that much of a creative entity. So we'll see. I think he'll be back in the team pretty sharp, I think, within the next week or so. But yeah, he was training on Saturday at Carrington. He was actually there doing work, and I think he'll be back reintegrated with the main group today.
Yeah, he may be on the bench for the Champions League game. Who knows? I'm not sure yet. But
when you've got injuries, you ain't got a lot of choice. You're going to bring players back, and this is the whole Jadon Sancho thing as well. And just add on top of that is that I do think that they're looking for a Jadon Sancho solution now for at least the short term. I would not be surprised to hear some kind of resolution there between manager and player, because you just need to get players available again, especially when you've got a big injury crisis.
Can never get too far away from a crisis regarding Man United at the moment, but they do play Galatasaray in the Champions League. Like I said at the top of the show, we will be going or doing a show shortly after or shortly towards the end of that game, and hopefully we'll be talking about something more positive than a 1-0 home defeat. But we'll see. United need to win, don't they?
They need to win in the sense that you need to win every game. Simple as that. Like, you do need to win every game. I think the thing is with the Champions League, Scott, it's great to be in it, but you want to win it. You want to be there to compete, don't you? And I actually think that, would it be the worst thing ever if Man United end up in the Europa League? Well, I don't want to be in the Europa League, being completely honest. I don't like those Thursday night wet evenings at Old Trafford and getting home at 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning. Just no fun, really. But ultimately, are Man United a Champions League club as it stands? You should still be good enough to get out of that group, but you're dealing with things, and when you're dealing with stuff at this time of the season, you still got to win points. So I actually think I'm going to put my neck on the block, Scott. Here we go. Rob puts his neck on the block. I think United will play quite well against Galatasaray and get the win. I do. I think if they carry on doing the right things, Galatasaray won't do the things that Crystal Palace did well. Galatasaray won't sit in as effectively as a Roy Hodgson team does. Roy Hodgson is like the genius of that. He's so good at it. Galatasaray will try and hit United and break. I'm sure Wilf Zaha that will be part of the narrative here. It already is. Have you seen it today? The truth about Wilf Zaha and Man United. Well, we all know the truth. What are you talking about? But Zaha would love to come back, wouldn't he, to Old Trafford and have a big game, and also show people in the Premier League that doubted him that he's still a major talent. But that's the dodgy side of it. I think if you can control Zaha, I think you can control that game better than you control Crystal Palace.
We'll see what United can do in the Champions League. They lost their first game in the competition away at Bayern. That's the hardest game in the group.
Yeah.
I don't think anybody was really expecting United to win there.
No.
But like
you shouldn't have lost it.
They did play well in patches.
Yeah, you shouldn't have lost it. If you were a better team or better at what you do, you shouldn't have lost it. Like, you could have got a draw out of that.
They played particularly well in the first 20 or so. And then obviously Andre Onana dropped one into his own net, and the same thing happens. United, they showed a little bit of fight, but they were quite loose in that game. And hopefully they just need to, like we talked about the other day, they just need to put a run of wins together and not lose in the fashion that they did the other day. I think scoring the first goal is so important to this team. It really is. I think if you want to avoid losing, start scoring first. I think that's the main thing.
Definitely. And it's their confidence, isn't it? Like, if they don't score first, they do look like different human beings. Like, they even the communication you watch, Scott, when United are winning games and leading, there's something outward about them. Like, you see it. They're all like, they're together, and there's high fives, and it's all of this. And when they're 1-0 down or more, it disappears. They all shrink, and they all look, like, as I called Bruno Fernandes, a little bit squashed. They look smaller. First goal against Galatasaray, first 15 minutes, get a goal and control the game. And then you should, fingers crossed, get the 3 points. But if you don't play well, Scott, at least win the game. Do that. Do what you need to do to get the 3 points.
We'll be around to reflect on whatever happens in that game at Old Trafford shortly after it finishes. So keep an eye out for that. Audio and video will be available on. But that's it for me and from Rob today, unless you've anything to add, Rob.
No, nothing really. Just in the sense that the best way to get over these speed bumps, Scott, is to go win the next game. So you've got Galatasaray come quickly, and I actually think Ten Hag will be appreciative of that. Is that you can get a performance out the team on Tuesday night. If you do that, then again, there's some of these questions that people are saying, oh, should he get sacked? Are we going down that path? This doesn't feel like Graham Potter at Chelsea to me. It doesn't feel like that. And in fact, I actually think Pochettino's under a lot more pressure at Chelsea than, say, Ten Hag is at Man United as it stands.
Well, I'm off to inevitably have a conversation about that with fans of other clubs. So I'll very much...
You love that, Scott, don't you?
Oh, I'm so tired of it. So boring. Anyway,
you're like the sparring partner. They're like there in the ring with you, and it's just like
you can't win either. You just can't win.
Face.
Everybody hates United. Everybody loves that United are failing.
Yeah,
and you can't say something right. You really can't, and that's just the way it is.
You're going to get told. Let's do the prediction now. You'll get told that the midweek win was just a flash in the pan, didn't mean anything, and you lost it. You lost on Saturday, and ha 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 ha.
Producer Harry has, I saw him tweet after the Arsenal win at Bournemouth.
Yeah.
And he said something along the lines of people jumped to conclusions that Man United were back. Nobody said that. Who said that?
No one said that. No one said that. But like I did say to you, Scott, privately, and I'll say it out here, when Man United become good again one day, and they will one day, it might be 20 years in the future, but it will be one day, we are coming for all of you. Right, just remember that, bookmark it. We are coming for all of you. Because when we used to win stuff, I used to be like a bit demure and go, oh, it's good we're winning, but you know, X, Y, and Z, let's be calm about it. Now, when we start winning stuff again one day, we're going to start banging that drum and we'll have the fun with it.
The title of the show is The Promised Land. And I'm sure if you've been supporting United through the 90s, you probably know what significance that holds. They're a long way away from it, so we'll be waiting a little while, Rob, until that happens. But anyway,
I want to see Scott singing "Things Will Only Get Better," banging a drum.
That's been us today. Subscribe wherever you get your pods and watch us on YouTube, the Promised Land of Manchester United podcast. Like the video, subscribe, leave a comment, and pop the notification bell on as well. Follow us on the social medias at @_Scott Saunders, @_Rob_B, and at Promised Land MU. We'll see you shortly after Manchester United versus Galatasaray. Let's hope it's not a 0-1 home defeat again. Let's hope for something more promising and something to build on that we could talk about. But Rob, thank you very much. Thanks for listening, everyone. This has been The Promised Land. See you soon.